All right, I see the recording. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Human Resources Appointment and Equity Committee meeting. Today is May 19th. If I could have the council clerk please call the roll.
On the roll, Ms. Brown.
Present.
Mr. Gallagher. Here. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller. Ms. Conwell.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that council members Baker and Simon are also in attendance.
Thank you, Council Members Baker and Simon, for joining us today. Is there any public comment?
No, Madam Chair, no one has sent in any public comment.
Okay, the last meeting we held was March 3rd, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 3rd. Do I have a second?
Second. I'll second.
Moved in second by Councilman Gallagher. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll move on to the two items that were referred to committee. Council Clerk, if you'll read those into the record. The first item into the record, please.
Resolution number 2020-0090, adopting various changes to the Cuyahoga County non-bargaining classification plan.
All right. And I think
Good morning, Madam Chair.
that
Can you hear me?
is-
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Albert.
Although you sound a little distant, if you can speak a little
You see, is this better?
bit better. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Albert Cuyahoga with the Personnel Review Commission. PRC routine maintenance necessitates.
Excuse me, Albert, I'm sorry, you're a little low still.
Let me move my laptop. Give me 1 second. Hello?
That's better.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Good morning. Again, I'm Albert Cuyahoga with the Personnel Review Commission. Routine maintenance necessitates the creation of 2 new classifications, the revision of 10 classifications, and the deletion of 5 classifications. The PRC approved recommending these to you at their April 22nd, 2020 meeting. All the modifications have been prepared by the PRC staff who's worked with the Department of Human Resource staff and the subject matter experts and managers at the respective departments. In accordance with the PRC rules, the proposed changes were posted on the PRC's website prior to your consideration today. I've sent you a summary of all the proposed changes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Standard questions. How many deletions, new and revisions are there?
Madam Chair, there are 5 classifications that we're proposing to delete and 10 classifications that we have updated or revised.
Okay. And of the ones that were deleted, I presume there were no incumbents in any of those positions?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, and as it relates to the revised classifications, any incumbents?
Majority of them do have incumbents, and the majority is just routine maintenance where there is no changes. There's a couple of the revisions that the pay grades changed up. Actually, none have been reduced. Whether that's an increase in pay, that'll be determined by the Human Resource Department, but none of the changes in pay grades have decreased at all.
Okay, that's good news. So relative to the increases, do we anticipate an impact to the overall budget, or are you unsure? Is that what you're referring to, Human Resources to determine?
Yeah, we determine the pay grade, and Human Resources will determine where along that pay grade the employee will get paid.
Okay, all right. I'll open it up to my colleagues if you guys have any questions.
This is Dale. I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question to Mr. Bushanine or to the Law Department is that I would like to get an explanation of how the Director of Real Estate Appraisal was determined to be unclassified, and why this happened after so much time. I presume this position has existed for a long time, and it's only recently that it was decided that it was unclassified.
Is this directed to me, Councilman Miller, or to Law?
Whomever can answer.
Whoever feels best able to respond.
I probably can share, Madam Chair, Councilman Miller, part of the story. The PRC received an email from Ed Morales on March of 2017, with a lot of people being copied, including Amy Margaret Renwald of the Law Department, essentially informing us that they've reviewed the job duties of that classification and determined that they're unclassified. For quite some time, Councilman, we've had these unilateral decisions, if you will, being made, and we, rather than move forward with the deletion, we've held on to these classifications in the class plan, even though there's no incumbent, until some sort of a mechanism or process can be achieved where we're not just receiving notice, but we're part of the process in somehow. So although this happened in 2017, we're just now moving forward with the deletion as we see no point in holding on to it. I know that we've been working on an ordinance with the Law Department and council staff, and my understanding is that language is still being worked on at this point.
So, could I get a response from the Law Department as to what it is about this position that makes it unclassified?
Certainly. Good morning, Councilman Miller. So my understanding is that the request initially came in to review the position back in 2017, and I believe it came from Lisa Rocco in fiscal. But my understanding is that the determination of unclassified status was because the person in this position can serve in a fiduciary capacity to the fiscal officer and perform some of the duties of the county auditor under the old form of government. So that's my understanding of how the determination was made. Why it's been several years, I'm not exactly sure of, but I know that there was a communication a few years back between Ed and, as Albert said, the PRC, based on a determination that the Law Department made.
So, Madam Chair, to the Law Department, what's the nature of the fiduciary responsibilities that come into play here that make this an unclassified position?
I believe it is because the person in this position can perform some of the duties or does perform some of the duties of the county auditor under our charter form of government. But I can definitely verify that and check with the fiscal office and get you a response on that.
Okay.
And just to clarify, I think that Albert, Mr. Bouchahine had said that there's no incumbents in any of those deleted classifications, but I do believe there is an incumbent in this director of real estate appraisal position, just to clear that up. Last I checked, there was.
That is correct, but he's currently in the as an unclassified employee.
Okay.
So can you clear that up for us, please? So the individual that we're speaking of, there's currently someone in the position?
Madam Chair, there is someone currently as the Director of Real Estate Appraisal, but based on the Law Department's determination, that employee is unclassified.
How long has that employee been with us?
There was a long-term employee who retired in 2017 when the gentleman, Mr. Harbaugh, was placed in that position in 2017. That's when this determination was made. So he's been in this position for 3 years, but he's a long-term county employee.
So he's in the position, but it is already currently unclassified.
The administration has determined that the position is unclassified, although the classification is still within the class plan unless we delete it today.
So it almost sounds as if the decision was ultimately made, and we're just this is really a technical adjustment to clean up the books, if you will, or take this position off of the record as a classified position if it's already been filled as unclassified.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Madam
Councilman
Chair,
was that Councilman Miller or Councilman Jones?
Councilman Miller,
Go ahead, please proceed.
as Madam Chair, to my colleagues, as was discussed, we're in the process of putting together legislation that's pretty far along that would clarify the process for creating unclassified positions and would involve an audit of all of the existing unclassified positions. And I would be uncomfortable removing this item from the class plan until we see what happens with that legislation. So I would like to make a motion to amend to take the item deleting the real estate appraisal position from the class plan out of the legislation, so that it remains in the class plan.
Is there any further discussion? It's been moved and second to remove that item from the class, from this resolution. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, so that item has been removed from the resolution. Are there any further questions with regards to the resolution from my colleagues? All right, so does this need to be moved under second reading suspension?
Madam Chair, if there's no objection, only because of the timeliness of some of the new positions, particularly the compliance coordinator, which is going to be the subject matter expert in HR on ADA and FMLA issues, particularly in the jail, I would request that this be moved forward under second reading suspension.
All right, at the request of the PRC, I'll move this item to the to the full body of the council under second reading suspension. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions, comments, or concern regarding this item? If there are no further questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right, that
Aye. Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Clerk, if you'll read the next item into the record, please.
Resolution number 2020-0093, confirming the county executive's appointment of Jesse S. Drucker upon his taking the oath of office as Director of Human Resources.
Good morning, Pat Smock on behalf of the Department of Human Resources, and we're pleased. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies, my microphone was off. Good morning, Pat Smock on behalf of the Department of Human Resources, and we're pleased to present Mr. Jesse Drucker for consideration as the county's next Director of Human Resources. Mr. Drucker joins us this morning virtually and appropriately socially distanced, as you can see. He's an attorney. He most recently served as the Senior Director of Enterprise Workforce Relations at the University of California, Irvine. Prior to that, he served as the Associate Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at Cleveland State University for over 5 years. He was sourced by the county and expressed interest. He met with the Executive and Chief of Staff and representatives of the HR staff. It's my understanding that the members of the committee have his resume. And if it pleases the chair and the members, Mr. Drucker is available to introduce himself and provide any insight into his background, qualifications, and vision. And this morning, we're pleased to present Mr. Drucker for consideration. We appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will turn it over to Mr. Drucker. Mr. Drucker, if you'll give us a little bit of your background and why you like to be our next Human Resources Director.
Surely, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I guess this is a little unusual, but it is my pleasure to meet with you this morning and look forward to your consideration. I think you have my resume in front of you. And what I'd like to do this morning is to highlight some of my accomplishments as they pertain to the position of Director of Human Resources for Cuyahoga County. I think, however, it's important, and you can see that I have a long history in human resources and labor relations. I think it's really important to start out, however, before I start to talk about job duties and accomplishments, to talk about philosophy. And I think that I have grounded my work in human resources with three foundational principles that I think have served me very well in the course of my various employment. The first foundational principle is that of transparency. It is important to me to be absolutely transparent in communications, in setting expectations, and in accountability, both my own and the people that report to me. I think this creates a basis for honest relationships. It creates a basis for clarity, and I think that over time it has worked very well in building high performing teams. The second, and a vast majority of my work, as you can see, has been in government and in nonprofit. And in those roles, it has been very important to me as a human resource leader to be a prudent steward of public funds, either in agencies that have been supported by public funds or in the governmental work that I have done. And third, and I think probably most importantly, is that I strive to gain a high level of understanding of my stakeholders' needs, so that we and the team that I lead can act collaboratively to meet the goals of the stakeholders. I think that I can point and will point to several examples, Cleveland State being one of them, the University of California, Irvine being another, the State University of New York at Stony Brook being a third, where we maintained a very high level of collaboration and were able to receive very high customer satisfaction scores. What I would like to do is to just highlight some of the accomplishments over the course of my employment. And as I said, you have my resume in front of you. I have been involved, the vast majority of my work has been involved in change management. And you know, with change management, it's an interesting dynamic. Number one, it's dealing with the change itself. But I think most importantly, it's dealing with the apprehension of change and bringing people along in an understanding of what that change means to them. And in a number of my positions, that was the major thrust of what I at State University of New York at Stony Brook. I was the initial incumbent as the labor relations manager. That the scope of that position included a 540-bed hospital and the 5 medical schools, comprised approximately 7,000 people. And it was my job to one, solidify the labor relations process in dealing with the labor unions, creating a unified voice for management in dealing with the labor unions, and creating expectations both among the labor representatives and the management functionaries as to how we would respond to various incidents, problems, and circumstances. At the Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital, I was the initial incumbent as Director of Employee Relations. And again, that had to do a lot with dealing one-on-one with the labor unions, creating expectations, but also forming a unified management position with respect to management's dealings with the with the employee representatives. As I moved from the California Northern Regional offices of Kaiser Permanente to the Human Resources leadership position in Fresno, there was a major organizational change. About 2 weeks before I started that position, the Human Resources organization went from a centralized operation to a decentralized operation. One of the complaints of my direct report in Fresno was that the Human Resources staff was not customer friendly, was not creating relationships with the people that they were representing. The reason for that was very simple. They didn't report to anybody in the facility. The human resource functionaries at the location reported to a central office about 200 miles away. Well, about 2 weeks before I got there, the organization changed as such that the human resource leader became the day-to-day operational leader in each of the human resources offices in the region. What it required of us was a very concentrated effort to build a new human resources team. It took probably about 2.5 years to do that, but it changed the human resources operation within the service area. It changed the outlook of the people, and we created, the human resources team and I created a very high functioning operation and increased our customer service scores by about 25%. At the same time, Kaiser Permanente was involved in what was called a labor management partnership. It was a cooperative effort with the representative unions and management to create a circumstance where we could bring about process improvement together. Kaiser Permanente guaranteed income for individuals whose jobs might be eliminated, guaranteed training, but the philosophy of the program was that those people who do the work are most knowledgeable in the manner in which it can be improved. And joint labor management teams were created. The Human Resources Department was the consultant to those teams in terms of operational and management philosophies. And the local teams in Fresno gained a whole number of national and regional awards for the work that they did. It was a very exciting time and an exciting experience to be involved in. When I left Kaiser Fresno and came to Cleveland State, I found a human resources organization that was in dire need of improvement. I understand that time to fill has been quite an issue at Cuyahoga County. It was quite an issue. It was quite an issue at Cleveland State. In terms of before the recruitment ever started, before the interviews ever started, candidates had found other jobs. It took so long. It took so long to bring people in. We had an average time to fill of 90+ days, which is not acceptable. So through process improvement and through training of hiring managers, within about a year, and I think I may have lost the video here. Within a year, we were able to bring the time to fill from an average of 90+ days to approximately 45 days, and we were working toward bringing it down to 35 days at the point that I left employment. At UC Irvine, again, I was the initial incumbent in that position. They reached out to me and asked me to come join them. When I left the University of California, I had left some pension on the table, and the plan was that after I was finished at Cleveland State, I would go back to UC. They beat my plan by about a year, but I was tasked with and was successful at bringing together 3 disparate employee relations functions to create an enterprise-wide approach to employee and labor relations. University of California, Irvine is about an organization of about 15,000 employees within 3 organizations, a 500-bed academic medical center, a school of health sciences, which is the medical school, the nursing school, the pharmacy school, and then the academic core, each with its own human resources department, each with its own operational methodologies, and each with its own employee relations philosophy. And I was charged with bringing all of those together. It was, I believe that it was very, very successful because I brought together some very experienced people and some new entrants into the field, and blended those efforts into a high performing team. I had a plan to come back to Northeast Ohio. As you can see, I have a home in Westlake. My family is in Westlake, and had wanted to continue my career. This opportunity, I think, is extremely interesting. I think has been made even more interesting because of the current conditions, and I believe that I can come in and make a substantial contribution to the efforts, the human resources efforts at Cuyahoga County. I think that what I have experienced over time, that my background includes work in employee engagement, extensive work in the labor management partnership that I mentioned before, a high level of training. I believe that training and development is an extremely important function for the human resources department. And I believe, as an example of that, I point to work that I've done at Cleveland State. Cleveland State had no management development program before I got there, and the talent management department and I put together a 3-level professional development program, a supervisory development program for supervisors and managers, a middle management training program, basically to create a succession plan, and an executive level team building exercise that was actually the foundation of how various cabinet level meetings were structured. I think I've developed superior relationships with the labor unions, and have won labor management awards, both at, as I said before, at Kaiser Permanente at the regional and national level, and with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees when I worked with New York State. So that having been said, are there any questions?
Thank you very much. I know that we're virtual here, but we do have some questions. And this
Surely.
is Chantel speaking. So, and I'll respectfully request that my colleagues announce themselves for Mr. Drucker, because he is not quite familiar with our voices yet. So, just as a courtesy to him, So having the vast majority of your experience being taking place outside of Ohio, how familiar are you with the laws regarding HR matters and classification plans, collective bargaining here in the state?
I am very familiar with it. My 5+ years at Cleveland State gave me quite an introduction. To that. I worked extensively on matters involving the state employee relations board. I negotiated or supervised 7 collective bargaining agreements, negotiated or supervised the negotiation of 7 collective bargaining agreements at Cleveland State, and was intimately involved with the legal department at Cleveland State in terms of discrimination actions and actions in front of the Civil Rights Commission.
Okay, so given your experience and knowledge, and one of the things, I don't know if you were privy to the first item on the agenda, our classification plan. What is your understanding of the purpose of our classification plan?
Well, the classification plan, my knowledge of that stems both from my reading of the code and my work at Stony Brook in a civil service environment. Two main aspects of the classification plan. One is to create qualification standards in terms of to create qualification standards so that candidates for employment can be judged on a level playing field in terms of the creation of job families, in terms of the creation of position descriptions. The other purpose of the classification plan has to do with pay considerations and pay equity considerations, so that people are compensated within a certain compensation scheme for their job classifications and for their job families. So it creates as I said before, it creates a level playing field in terms of people being judged on their merit and being paid equitably in relation to other individuals and their classification.
Okay, and on that note, how familiar are you with the division of responsibilities as in Cuyahoga County as it relates to HR and the PRC, with the personnel review?
So I've spent a considerable amount of time with the county code, a considerable amount of time with the PRC Administrative Handbook, and Mr. Brown and I have had a rather extensive conversation with regards to the employment relationship as it pertains to the PRC and the Department of Human Resources. I have on my schedule to speak to Rebecca with respect to the actual physical relationship between the PRC and the Department of Human Resources. If at such time as I come on board, if I come on board, she is one of the first people I'm going to be speaking with. I understand that there's been a fair amount of work that has been done between the PRC and the Department of Human Resources in terms of time to fill and relationship. I understand that relationship is a good relationship, and I want to be able to continue that.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to my colleagues for questions.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Parnell Jones.
Councilwoman Conwell, and then we'll have Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking for the little mic thing. I have a couple questions. Mr. Drucker, good morning. I'm Councilwoman Conwell. Nice to meet you virtually. I'm sure we'll meet. There was a question, you were on the call earlier in regards to when we handled the first piece of legislation in regards to the real estate appraiser. Could you give us your feelings on how you would feel for that being an unclassified or a classified position?
So my initial, well, let me respond this way.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Chantel, this is Joe Nani. We're having a technical difficulty right now with the live stream. And my concern right now is if we proceed that we're not working legally. If we don't mind, we can keep this video going. I truly apologize for a couple minutes. The IT folks are trying to fix this, and I can let you know what's happening in a minute or two. I just need to get on the phone. I'm very sorry, but I'm just worried that if we proceed any longer, we're not in compliance with the law.
Thank you.
So
certainly want to be in compliance. We'll give ourselves a 2 to 3 minute break, and that'll give Mr. Drucker a little time to compose his response.
yes, I apologize, Mr. Drucker. So I'm gonna get on a call right now. Thank you. Hold on.
Give us the go ahead, Joe.
Will do.
Virtually. Welcome back to those who are watching via live stream. Mr. Drucker, we're going to pick up where Ms. Conwell left off with her question regarding your opinion as it related to the Director of Real Estate. So if you would like to proceed, I'll turn it back over to you.
Of course, thank you. Ms. Conwell, I don't necessarily have enough information to talk directly about the position. However, what my impression was that my thought was that there really should have been, or there looks to be a need for some type of guidance or some type of ground rules with respect to whether things should be classified, should move from the classified service to the unclassified service. This is not an unusual problem, either in public service or in private industry. I've had experiences, I've had circumstances in both instances where people have wanted to move positions either from classified to unclassified service or from a unionized position to a non-union position, and basically having the same duties. Those were my thoughts prior to Councilman Miller talking about pending legislation. Now, I'm not necessarily familiar with that, but I would have to make an assumption that the pending legislation would create those ground rules or guidance that I've spoken about. It would be as a matter of law, not necessarily guidance. But I think there should be some clear, determinative guidance in terms of how we move positions either out of or into the classified service, or out of or into unionized positions. It didn't appear to me to exist in this particular instance, especially since this was the same position. There didn't appear to be any changes in the position that may or may not have brought about the change in the classification status.
Okay.
So I would like an opportunity to take a look at the pending legislation, but I would have to make an assumption right off the top of my head that it would probably measure up to guidance or ground rules that I've spoken about. It's really very important to me, just as a general statement, it's really very important to me that people have expectations as to what is going to happen if they do certain things. And then they can make informed decisions about whether they want to move forward or not, and understand what consequences would be of taking a particular action. I think it makes for a better organization, it makes for a more fruitful organization.
Excuse me, this is Joe Nani again. I truly am sorry about this. this is just crazy right now. That technically we can live stream to YouTube, but the link needs to be put on the county's homepage to be compliant. So I'm hesitant to continue moving again until I get confirmation that the link for YouTube is is up on our website. I'm very sorry, but I wanted to make sure I did this as soon as I knew. If you give us 2 minutes, I will try to do this. If not, we may have to reschedule. So hold, please.
Okay, Mr. Drucker, are you familiar with, can you hear me, Mr. Drucker?
Man, you're coming a little choppy, but yes, I can.
If confirmed, hiring of the contact tracers, to my understanding, will be facilitated by each county across the state. How do you plan on making sure equitable hiring with African Americans will occur?
So,
are you familiar with the? Okay.
Yeah, I am familiar with it. Yes, and I know that there are several online seminars that are being broadcast with respect to the requirements and the skills and abilities needed to do that. I think my first the first part of that process would be to send the appropriate individuals to those seminars to understand what those jobs are all about. With respect to equitable hiring, one of the things that was a high level of concern at Cleveland State was the issue of equitable hiring. And what we did is we developed, each of the recruiters that were there developed recruitment areas that they concentrated on in terms of sourcing and specialized sourcing. I would think, just right off the top of my head, I would think that going to community job fairs or virtual job fairs, working with Jobs Ohio would be very important in this. I think that the county is now in a very good position that because of the current economic situation, there's a large influx of job seekers in the labor market, and I think that the county would be in a very good position to develop a hiring plan that would encompass the entire community. It's very important to me, both from a professional point of view and a personal point of view, that my employer be representative of the community that it serves. I have a polyglot. I come from a polyglot family, and I understand the need to have diversity within each and every organization that I've worked in, and I've been fortunate enough to work in areas that are highly diverse. So I have a fair amount of experience in terms of equitable. In that regard, I have a fair amount of experience in terms of equitable hiring.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Conwell. Councilman Jones, you are up next.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning, Mr. Drucker. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Here you can't see you.
Yes, sir, I can.
Great. Great. And again, welcome. I'm glad you have made it this far in the process. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, my question is, in fact, I think I'll follow up on Councilwoman Conwell's question first. Share a little bit of your experience in the efforts of improving diversity, but speak more to what you've done in upper management positions and how these efforts help you to improve diversity in the upper management here at the county.
So there are several things that I have been involved in, either as the human resource leader or as part of the team. Again, I call it specialized hiring. That's not a descriptive term, unfortunately, but it is seeking out recruitment sources that are diverse. At Cleveland State, it was important to us to be representative of the population that we served, and Cleveland State's mission was to bring education to the inner city, to people who had not necessarily been exposed to college, or people who had started college and for whatever family reasons or economic reasons had to drop out. And so it was very important to CSU that they be representative of the community. We developed sourcing outlets that let us tap into the diversity of Northeast Ohio. Job fairs, diversity advertising, mentorship programs. We established a mentorship program for high school aged kids who especially wanted to go into STEM. We went into the community. We went into the community to develop people who were economically disadvantaged, ready for the work, to make them ready for the workforce. There were like and similar efforts to try to garner people from diverse backgrounds to come to work for CSU, and to make them ready to participate in the workforce. I would believe that we could develop the same thing for Cuyahoga County if it does not now exist. I don't know what type of programs exist currently. I would want to go in and take a look and concentrate my efforts in that regard.
Okay. Were those efforts at CSU able to increase the diversity at the upper management levels of CSU?
Yes, as a matter of fact, CSU won a diversity award in executive management during the time that I was there. Yes, we made a concerted effort to ensure that our administration was diverse, and it was.
Excellent, excellent. My next question, what would be your first priority upon confirmation as HR director?
I think there are a number of priorities that I garnered from speaking with people. I know that the county is in the middle of an ERP installation. It's been ongoing. It appears that the end of it's on the horizon, and I know that the human resources team is actively engaged. I think that would be one of my first priorities, to jump into the ERP installation. And I've already started some discussions with Mr. Rhines, on that. I know that there's been talk and interest in either an early retirement program or a separation incentive program. I would want to start to look at that. I understand that preparations have been made for potential furloughs. I don't know how far along the discussions have had with the union on that, but I believe that that's a priority. I would want to obviously look at the organization, see if we can build some cost savings in there, some procedural improvements in there. generally sit with my leaders to see how we can bring in process improvement. Time to fill, as we talked before, I want to start to build a relationship with the PRC in terms of time to fill, and also time to fill for the non-classified, the unclassified positions, and leaves management. I understand that there's a concern. I understand there's a concern with leaves management. So I think that at least out of the gate, we've got some things to start to look at and see how we can start to corral some of those things.
Okay. Just the last question, just in response to your comment, how would you balance those cost savings with the operational needs of the county? And have you been asked to make 15% cuts in the HR department?
So I've been in that position where I've been asked, where I have been asked to make cuts. I think that there are several things we need to look at. First, we need to look at non-salary expenditures, and how are we spending our expense budgets in terms of an actual need, and what we can shave off of those. Then secondly, and part of this process improvement involves this in terms of how do we do our business? How efficient are we in terms of our effectiveness, and how is the staff being utilized? I think after that we can very well then look at making some type of budget savings. 15% is pretty tough, but I've been in a position of having to do that before, and we've done it, and we've come out of it on the other end a much more leaner, much more effective organization.
All right, thank you, Mr. Drucker. Mr. Jones, is that complete?
It does, Madam Chair. Thank you.
May I make a comment for a moment to Mr. Jones? So you and I talked about the term diversity, and I think that it is worthwhile talking a bit about what does diversity mean. Over time, diversity takes a whole number of different meanings, and I think that probably for the first time we're looking at a number of layers of multi-generational employees in terms of how we manage them, how we can best utilize those employees because of because of how they have become acculturated. So I think that the initial question with diversity is, how are we defining diversity? And I think that working with management and the council, with executive administration and the council, I think we would probably be able to come up with a very solid definition there, and then move forward from there.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Drucker. We have done a diversity study, a disparity study here at the county over the years. We have defined it as African American, Hispanic, as a majority of the minorities. So that's how we've thought about it.
Okay. I've not seen that work.
To that point, if I may, Councilman Jones, Mr. Drucker, that disparity study I think is on the shelf right now and is probably up for review. And I'm not sure if that timeline has expired. I know there was a 5-year marker on the research that we had done when I first come on board in 2015, and we instituted some resolutions to try to make up the disparity that we believe to be the case, but as you may very well be aware of, needed research and data to support what we believe to be the case. And so we should have a collection of that data over the last 5 years for review to see if we've made any improvements in the area, of awarding contracts to African Americans and the Hispanic and Latino community. So I would respectfully note that as a point of discussion in the future from our staff, Mr. Browning and Mr. McAleer, if you can make a note of that for future discussion, and anyone under the administration that would be able to contribute to that conversation, because I think especially with the COVID-19 emphasizing the systemic racism that has impacted African Americans, Black and Brown people relative to health and wellness, and as it relates to the PPP, all of these things are realities that we as people of color know and face, but have not had the statistical data in our artillery to be able to make some adequate adjustments.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that, and I'll go back. I just wanted to make that point, but I think it's important that we note that. And so I'll go on to Councilman Miller. Councilman Miller, I know you were up next, so you may proceed with your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And first of all, on the disparity study, I would make everyone aware that the second disparity study, the 5-year update, is currently underway, and a lot of the information has been gathered. So we should be getting a report within the next few months as to where we are. So that's important. Next, a question for the administration. My question is whether Mr. Drucker was sourced through our own internal process or through a consultant that we hired to assist in the search.
Pat Smock on behalf of the Department of Human Resources. Thank you, Councilman, for your question. Oh, apologies, my microphone is off again. Apologies, Madam Chair and Councilman. I'll answer on behalf of the administration. As members of the committee are aware, some and the Board of Control as well, we did ask for and did have approved a search firm to search for Chief Human Resources Officer and Chief Information Officer. At that time, we informed that firm that we'd be exhausting the county's own processes in order to find excellent candidates, outstanding candidates for those positions. And the county did source Mr. Drucker ourselves through our search group in Human Resources, our talent acquisition team. And so we did not engage, although we did have an approved contract to do so, we did not engage the search firm at this time for this particular sourcing, and nor were any payments made to that search firm. They're sort of in holding pattern, as it were, Councilman.
Okay, thank you very much. And to Mr. Drucker, I'd like to first of all welcome you and congratulate you on your recommendation for appointment. We certainly have a strong need for someone to hold the full title and lead us effectively on human resources. And my first question, to follow up on what you said about ERP, the biggest human resources problem we've been having relating to the ERP is that we have had a heck of a time sourcing some of the IT people that we need to help with the installation and management of the system. And as a result, we've had to engage a contracting firm to access resources at much higher expense. And my question is whether you're going to prioritize helping the county be more effective in accessing the IT people that we need for the ERP system, and whether you have some ideas on how you can add value to that process.
So, Councilman, thank you very much, Councilman. I'm not familiar, at least at this point, I'm not familiar with what efforts we have made to utilize professional associations or to utilize specific sourcing sources for IT. nor am I familiar with what our placement in the labor market is. What percentile are our salaries in comparison to the rest of the labor market? So I think that going in, those are two of the things that I would need to look at right at the outset. I would also want to get some idea from the IT people as to the quality of the county's IT operation in terms of the age of the hardware, how sophisticated is the hardware, what opportunities, to the effect of what opportunities does that give someone coming in the opportunity to work with cutting edge technology to create an opportunity for people to expand their knowledge base. So I think those are some of the factors that I would want to look at prior to giving you a direct answer to your question. I could do that within a very short period of time, given I get answers to those questions. I think it's really important from a recruitment standpoint. It's obvious to me that I would want to know, where have we gone before? I wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel on that. And what is available to us for further sourcing? Number one. Number two, what type of internal availabilities do we have with respect to the skill level of people already working for the county? And number three, what relationships do we have to some of the universities around that would potentially have people who are either graduates or people who are about to graduate that could help us fill that position.
Okay, and thank you for that. And my next question is, I'd like to ask about your general philosophy of compensation as to raises in salary. Do you favor doing it primarily based on longevity, or do you want to move us to a performance-based system? And if you want to go performance-based, I would like to hear your insights on what you think that would look like and how quickly you think that we could get there.
So I guess my own philosophy is sort of a hybrid in terms of an employer having some responsibility to maintaining a certain wage level, a market-based wage level for their employees, number one. But two, having a pay for performance scheme on top of that, with respect to measurable goals, measurable and attainable goals, and goals that are thought out in relation to the organizational priorities. My own methodology for that was to work with my team to create a set of goals based on the organization, A, the organization's goals, B, the department's priorities, C, the section's priorities, and D, a project or projects that the individual wanted to work on with respect to their own either professional development or section development or some such to that nature. And I think the balance between a cost of living equation and a performance equation is probably the optimum way of going. A certain basic security level, but a certain professional development, organizational development opportunities. I put a plan in place like that at CSU on an individual institutional basis, and I was part of a plan putting that into effect at Kaiser Permanente as being one a number of service areas that did that as an organization wide. Took about 12 to 18 months to get the entire plan up and running, because it took training in terms of managerial training. It took training in terms of individual employee training. It took development time with respect to performance evaluations, training being goal setting and the way in which goals would be interpreted. Training of employees to make them aware of the system and how to work their part of the system. Development of the methodologies and reports that we required, and we launched.
Okay.
And it was reasonably successful. It
Okay,
incorporates
thank-
employee engagement, professional development, and
Please leave your name, number, and any message, and we'll call back.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. And I'd like to ask one more question about a related area, which is the question of pay equity. Our current county government was reorganized from a number of disparate elements 10 years ago when we created the new government, and we brought in systems that had very different pay systems, and we have inequities between pay of similar employees that exist to this day. And my question is, what would be your approach to trying to correct these inequities and develop a system that's equitable, both internally comparing one to another and also externally comparing to the market?
Yeah. So, Councilman Miller, I think part of that question is really fact specific in terms of the individual pay arrangements, where the particular pay arrangements fit within the scheme of the internal salary scheme, and then again to the external salary scheme. So let me answer that the best I can with the little knowledge that I have. I think with regard to the equity in the labor market itself, the external labor market, I think the county has probably already has it, but the county needs to come to an understanding as to where they want salaries to be vis-a-vis the external labor market for individual positions. So they want to be in the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, the 75th percentile. So that would drive part of the analysis on internal pay equity. The second, and probably for purposes of this, where do the individual salaries how do the individual salaries compare, and what do we consider an equitable pay range? Is a 10% differential between positions equitable? Do we want exactly the same pay for all titles? Do we want some longevity factored into that? So I think we would need to create the data, which is readily available. We need to create the data in terms of where are the inequities, and what do we consider an equitable arrangement.
Okay, thanks very much. I might have a question or two later, but at this point, I'm going to let the chair move on to other questioners.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman Miller. The floor is open for our colleagues if you have any other questions. Mr. Gallagher, we haven't heard from you. Did you have any questions? I thought the equity question might have prompted your thoughts.
Mr. Gallagher, you're on mute.
We back?
Yep, you're there.
There we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I might have some suggestions. I don't know. Mr. Drucker, what's your understanding of the HR department as we stand today?
I've gotten mainly, for the people that I've spoken to, I've gotten mainly positive remarks about the individuals who work in the department. I've gotten some suggestions in terms of areas that need to be looked at. As I said before, there were a couple of other things. I spent a considerable amount of time with Holly Woods, talking to her about the department operations and where she believed that the weaknesses were. I think my impression coming in, and of course, I would need to come in myself to take a look and produce a report. My impression is that the foundational aspects of the department and the mainstay of individuals working there is sound. Where some of the operational aspects need to be strengthened is a question in my mind. Whether or not some individuals are working up to full capacity or being utilized to full capacity is a question. But my impression, without having set foot in the department, is that the operation is basically sound. What other operation? I'm sorry, sir.
I would just, I don't want to take up too much time because we're up against it. I would suggest that you have an awful lot of good employees in that division. The problem that we had was the mismanagement, and absolutely no direction from the previous director. In my opinion, we haven't had a really good director. Our first one was good, I thought, but that's just a personal opinion. I would highly suggest you listen to the employees, not management, on what's going right and what's going wrong. The last guy was management directed, and he went out the door. Thank God. Let me give you a hypothetical. An employee is under indictment for a criminal act in the county with county records. What do you do with that person, regardless of position? Under indictment now.
So where I've had that situation before, there are a couple of considerations. Number one, from point of indictment to point of finality, whatever that finality is, could be a very long period of time. The question is, do we put that person out on administrative leave with pay? And I've had situations where we have put people out on administrative leave with pay. I've had situations where we have put them on administrative leave without pay. I would think that in a highly sensitive position, that I would err on the side of putting somebody out on administrative leave without pay, or potentially talking to executive administration about negotiating some type of terminal contract, some type of exit scheme, rather than have that person there. The ultimate decision is extremely fact-sensitive. Does it involve someone? The considerations are the following. Does it involve someone who has a high?
Let me stop you. You're going in the right direction. Again, others may have questions. We had a situation where we had the HR director in a criminal indictment for playing funny with it with records. He stayed on. Other employees got caught stealing crazy little things or water, and that individual puts those people out on the street. You are walking into a situation where the employees of this county have to sit back and look at actions like that by the administration, supported by the HR director. And I'm telling you right now, you better have a spine, and you better have a sense of what these employees have been put through. You are walking into the valley of darkness, my friend, and these employees don't like us very much. And they should, but they don't. And the reason they don't are actions like that. And all I'm looking from you is a sense of fairness. Not looking for an answer, but I know that guy shouldn't have been there. You know that guy shouldn't have been there. Whether or not he's paid or not is not my concern. He should have been removed, at least until the situation is resolved. And it didn't happen. And our employees had to sit back. The elected officials had to sit back and watch that. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. And it happened. So I'm just telling you, that's a little taste of what's going on around here, and it's not good. And HR needs to be turned around.
Right.
My friend, and I wish you the best. Talk to the people that are the employees. They know what's best. Do not talk to management. Do not talk to elected officials. Talk to the employees, and you will be successful. Thank you.
So, Mr. Gallagher, may I respond for a moment?
Yes, sir.
I don't have a problem addressing issues. I've been in this field for a very long time, and I understand what are satisfiers in the employment situation and what are dissatisfiers in the employment situation. And one of the dissatisfiers, just as a general statement, is inconsistency. Right. That management an appearance, the general term is appearance of impropriety. In this case, it's an appearance of favoritism, or an appearance of the word slips my memory for the moment, but that people are being treated in a disparate manner. And it is very important. It is very important as leaders in the organization that we do not treat people in a disparate manner. That people understand that if they take certain actions, there will be certain results and consequences. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but they will be consistent. And I think that's in an instance like that, like what you're describing in this hypothetical, that's what's important.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And as I said, no problem in the world addressing issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll open up to others. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Thank you, Mr. Drucker. Are there any additional questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Simon.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on your nomination to this position. We appreciate you being here on Zoom. My question is, it's Councilwoman Simon. I've heard you say that in the past you've had to make tough cuts, 15%. It was tough to do, but on the other side, you said it was better, it was more efficient. I want your answer about the county. This is a unique form of employment where we serve residents that pay taxes and critical services to our populace. And if you're asked to review 15% cuts and you're asked about it by our council oversight committee, and you understand that these cuts are not going to make us more efficient, but in fact that they're going to hurt the residents and departments, delivery of services like TANF, our jail population being jeopardized by cuts, will you be able to stand up to us in our committee meetings to say these 15% cuts in this area, in these areas, are not prudent, they don't make sense, and potentially they could be dangerous to our wards in our jail and our residents?
So, Councilmember Simon, I think the answer to that question really comes in the analysis prior to those decisions going to an oversight committee. The question really has to deal with what is the impact of these cuts and how do we mitigate that impact? I think that's a very important question in deciding how we're going to effectuate these cuts. I think, you know, we throw out a term, everyone has a 15% cut. Well, is that necessarily the way to go about it? I think the initial question before the decisions are actually made is what is the impact to the population that we serve? How severe is it going to be, and what is the impact down the road in terms of the services that we deliver? I think that's really the mitigating question. There may be areas that can't sustain a 15% cut, and maybe there are areas that can sustain more in the hypothetical. And while it may not seem equitable to say, okay, you're going to take a lesser cut and you're going to take a greater cut, I think that we as responsible administrators need to look at it that way. There are people there are people in Cuyahoga County that really depend on these services, and the fact of the matter is that there will be a detrimental life effect if we do something to that nature. So where else can we look? Where else can we, to avoid something like that? The question then becomes, where else can we look to make these cuts or reduce some services? How do we navigate through this problem? It should not be used as a knife. It should be used as a navigation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilwoman Simon. Thank you, Mr. Drucker. Are there any additional questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may ask a question?
Yes, Councilwoman Baker, please proceed.
Thank you. And Mr. Drucker, certainly congratulations on this recommendation. I wanted to just follow up with Councilman Miller, and it's just a specific question. I too have been involved in many of the smaller group meetings of the ERP, and one of the large concerns and obstacles that we've had in hiring, because we have had to hire and outsource, which of course is more costly, is the time that it takes, sometimes months, to fill some vacant positions. What can we do to improve the time to onboard employees quickly? We have been told that it could take too long, and we have lost candidates by the time we get through the process. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on trying to lessen the process?
Thank you, Councilmember Baker. I've given a great deal of thought to it, and I don't know, sitting here and now, I don't know what work has been done to try to improve the time to fill. That's going to be one of the initial inquiries. I have been very successful in doing process improvement in terms of the methodology for time to fill within the constraints that are put upon us in terms of public employment and other legal considerations. As I said before, we had a very like and similar problem when I got to CSU. It was a 90+ days it was a 90+ days time to fill, and we got it down to 40. We got it down to 45 within 6 months to a year. We did simple things. We found that people who volunteered for search committees went on vacation. They volunteered for a search committee, went on vacation, and the search stopped. Well, we made it a blanket. We made it a blanket rule that if you volunteered for a search committee, you weren't going to go on vacation during the period of the search, or you were going to work around the search when you went on vacation. We looked at the manner in which minimum qualifications were looked at and preferred qualifications were looked at. Prior to the process improvement, hiring managers, the Human Resources Department could not start to look at applications until the posting was taken down. Well, if you don't start to move on it until that point, you're wasting a tremendous amount of time in starting to cull out those candidates who meet the minimum qualifications. You're not moving on the application, but you can do the groundwork so that you move the moment the posting is closed. At the initial part of the process, the application pool went to affirmative action to be certified, and then came back down to look at the preferred qualifications, and then back up to affirmative action to be certified. Well, we combined that into one motion, and we saved about 3 weeks worth of time. So there are techniques that we can look at in terms of utilization of time that maintain the processes that we're mandated to maintain, but shorten the processes, just as an example. Now,
Thank
that
you.
having been
would
said, I don't know.
That does become a priority for you. I understand and I hear what you're saying, and those are some of the examples that we've been given as to why it is going at a slower pace. So slow, I said, could take months. At the time we're ready to make the offer, that other person has already found something else. So thank you for giving me some insight, and I ask that you look further into it if that opportunity presents itself to you.
Absolutely.
On that note, I do want to acknowledge the efforts that the PRC has made in collaboration with the HR department to shorten the testing, to actually make the testing more widely available for candidates, to shorten the hiring process. So there have been some efforts in that area. And as you come in, my hope is that you continue to work closely with the PRC so that we can continue the progress that has been made relative to the hiring timeframe. Are there any other questions from my colleagues?
Yes,
Madam
Chair.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Councilman Miller, and then immediately after Councilman Miller, I will come to you, Councilwoman Conwell. Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Drucker, just a comment about one area I want to make you aware of that needs your immediate attention, which is that the county has something like 232 people that the county decided could not work remotely and don't have frontline positions. And so they've just been sitting at home doing nothing, and they've had to use the special COVID related leave time, but now that's used up and they're getting to the point where they're having to use their own personal leave time, and the county is in the process of figuring out how they're going to bring these people back to work as we start to reopen. There's talk of possibly using some of them for contact tracing or maintaining the screening when people come into the building and things like that. But this whole process is moving very slowly, and it needs a shot in the arm from leadership so that these people aren't just left hung out to dry. So I just want to make you aware of that for your action.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. Records, you should also note, you touched on the furlough. The furlough has actually begun, so I do want to make sure that you are aware of that. I think it's been introduced as a 21-week furlough period, and that we've had some discussions from the council's perspective just as recent as yesterday during our finance and budget meeting, that if the CARES federal funds will afford us to use that as a loss of revenue, that those employees should regain the compensation that they've lost to the furlough. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Councilwoman Conwell.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. To Mr. Drucker, again, hello, Councilwoman Conwell. I just was wondering if you've had a chance to look at the original organizational chart in terms of HR. In light of the 15% cut suggestions that are being talked about, there were 4 positions that were created under the HR director. Have you had a chance to look at that? And if so, would that be something that you would like to continue?
I have, I guess, what is the latest organizational chart, Councilmember Conwell. And I note that there are a couple of vacant positions on that. I would have a question with respect to vacant positions, just as a general question, as to whether or not those vacant positions that where a hiring has not proceeded, is that considered part of the 15%? Are we including those in any cuts?
And that's the reason that I brought it up, Mr. Drucker. So if you could request from the because I know we had a couple of openings in the HR, in those 4 positions that were created under the current administration to roll under the HR director. If you could ask the administration to provide you with the original organizational chart that just had the executive, and then it was the HR director, and then it was the staff. Maybe that might be something that could assist with going forward with the 15% cuts. But then again, I don't know the positions that are currently the 2 that are remaining in. So if I just want to bring that to your attention, if you could take a look at the original organizational chart for HR.
I will do that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Conwell. Are there any additional questions, comments, or concerns relative to Mr. Drucker's appointment? Going once, going twice. You are all unmuted if you like. I will go. Okay, so there being no additional questions, comments, or concerns, Mr. Drucker, I want to thank you so much for coming before this body to sharing your knowledge and experience. Congratulations on getting this far. I do believe this is a matter that needs to be referred to the full council under second reading suspension. So I will make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second by Councilman Miller. Questions, comments, or concerns? If all are in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any objections?
Aye.
Okay, there are no objections, so congratulations. This will move to the full body of the council. Council Clerk, are you still with us?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. I think at this point we would be looking for any miscellaneous business or any miscellaneous comments. Okay, if there are none, then we will bring this meeting to a close. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time, Mr. Drucker.
All right, thank you very much.